Hey guys, and welcome back to the shop. Now that we've got the back part of the cage all set up in the Chevelle, it's time to move forward. Welcome to the Kiefer's Hot Rod Shop YouTube channel. I'm Nick Kiefer. Hey guys, and welcome back. Like I mentioned earlier, now that we've got the back of the cage all kind of sorted out here, what I want to do next is need to go ahead and make roof and A-pillar bars. I'm doing bars which go all the way from the main hoop down the A-pillar, and they're even going to go all the way down to the frame, the original chassis of the car. I've already gone ahead and clearanced out the dash here. I used a piece of 1 5/8 tubing to make sure that I can get a tube in at the right angle and right position for that. And you can also tell that I've cut the floor open. I've got this all ground down, measured the angle, 27.5 degrees, everything's ready. So next what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna run over to my shop, make up this A-pillar and roof bar, and we're gonna see how it fits. Got the tubing here sitting on the cold saw, and I'm gonna go ahead, cut a piece, and make an A-pillar and roof bar. All right, well, the battery ran out during this 45-degree bend I was doing right here, but you pretty much caught the gist of it. I've been kind of fine-tuning this thing and tweaking it off camera for a little bit, and now it's time to go ahead and put the last bend in it. Now, this has 1, 2, 3, and 4 bends. This one's just like 3.5 degrees, so it's kind of hard to tell it's there. But what this is doing is, this is the A-pillar of the car, and then this is kind of the door hinge post area, and the dash, it passes through the dash around here, and it comes up into the roof in this area, so that's why there's this 3.5 degree bend, and it goes level along the roof. And now what I finally need to do is bend it back down and also inward a little bit towards the center of the car, just to catch that main hoop. So I'm going to go ahead, mark that all out for that last bend, and then we'll get notching and cutting after that. Ahead and I set the bar up in the notcher here, and I'll kind of take you around to kind of see how I set it up. Alright, so I went ahead and I lined the hole saw up against the mark. Another great thing to do is make sure you've got the right size hole saw in, and it looks like I've got a 1 5/8, yep, which matches the main hoop. But the other thing that I've done is gone ahead, used the level. This is right about 0, where this mounts onto the main hoop, is 40 degrees from vertical or 50 degrees from horizontal. Complete that 90 degrees. So what I've done is, I know that this tube is supposed to be vertical, and so I've measured the angle that it's leaning at, and I get 40 degrees, while my notching axis is at 0. So I'm looking good. On right now that I've completed the notch, which is kind of out of frame here, is I'm actually working on marking for that cut this front lower end of the tube where it's going to sit on the frame rail. I know the surface of that frame rail is actually angled at 27.5 degrees, so I'm going to set up the cold saw to cut at that angle, but I want to mark everything out so that I can line it up with the blade of the cold saw really nicely. All right, cool. So I've got it set up in the cold saw here. Got this thing leveled out, and I also have my marks lined up with the blade. So here's my overall length mark, and then that's the inside, actually outside mark. And when the blade comes down, you can look down that and line the camera up. See how that lines up. So looking pretty good. I think I'm leaving just a little extra on the bone anyway, maybe an eighth inch or so. So I'm gonna go ahead, we'll check out the cut, I'll put it back on the time lapse one more time, and we'll see how it fits in the car later. All right, cool, so here's the piece. You look down it, you can kind of see what's going on, how everything leans, and then how it kind of pops up. But there's nothing like trying it out in the car. It's raining right now, and I have to take it over to the other shop. I think it'll be okay though. It's a light rain, and this thing's got coolant all over it anyway. So let's go check it out. So from this angle, you can't even see it, but it's in there. That is tight. Nice. Look at that. Mates up with the main hoop pretty well. Outer notch is pretty good. I think the inner notch is pretty good too. I have to work that a little bit just to get it fit in perfectly, but look at that fit to the A-pillar. Woo, that is tight. Here we go. Nice and parallel. That is sweet. Tucks into the dash nicely. I'm able to get it nice and hard up against there. Got just a little wiggle room, and that looks good. Man. Now the challenge will be to make a perfect mirror partner for it. Should be able to do that. I've got all the angles. Just kind of drops down, touches the frame down there. I'm glad I did that to follow the roof. That turned out really well. Wasn't sure how that looked, but it is super tight. That's awesome. Really, I mean, it looks great, but I did it just, you know, to give maximum room for the driver's helmet. Make it nice and safe. And then if all the bends are right, this bend should be in plane with the roof bar here, nice and straight, so that getting a windshield bar in there won't be too hard. But that'll be next after I get the passenger side A-pillar and roof bar all made up to match this one. Nice. All right, so next it's going to be time to go ahead and move on to the passenger side. So I've already started to get things marked out for cutting the floor and trimming the dash to fit the A-pillar bar on that side. Also, the owner of the car stopped by today, and he is digging the roof and A-pillar bar. Likes the fit and all that. So off camera, I've actually gone ahead and I've bent up the other side. It's just basically the same process as the driver's side, but in mirror. So I just kind of wanted his approval before moving forward any further. I've started to mark out how I'm going to trim the dash, and I've also marked the rectangular hole that I'm going to be cutting in the floor to match the other side. And so that's what I'm going to do right now, is cut out this floor, and then after that I'll mess with this dash here. Another thing that I talked to the owner of the car about is it kind of sounds drastic, but I can do it really cleanly, and it's going to work out really great, I think. So once I put the bars in place, like where that one is, and then this one will obviously go here. When I pick the body of the car up off the frame to complete all the roof area welds and stuff like that, and put a little bit of paint on top of the bars, I'm going to need to be able to have those A-pillar bars move like this. And obviously I don't want to go cutting a big chunk out of the visual part of the dash here. And I also was considering picking the body of the car up at like a 45-degree angle to match the angle of the A-pillars. So just kind of pick the body up like this. And that's also, I think I'd mentioned before in the video, that's why I, gave a little extra room up here. And in addition to this giving me room to weld all this stuff, it also would allow for that motion. But the issue that arises is, and I can show you better on the driver's side, is I would be picking the body up at that angle. The bar would ram into the main structure of the dash. So this kind of channel strip thing at the bottom of the dash is like the main structure and the main spot that it ties into the cowl of the vehicle with, and so you can kind of see how that bracket ties into the cowl there and everything. So what I'm going to do instead is, let me get back over to the passenger side here. So since the dash pad comes down to this trim piece pretty much, and then it covers all this stuff with the holes all the way across. It also goes all the way to the A-pillar molding here. This is like a kind of rubber piece. I guess you'd call it a pad. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slit the dash here. I'm going to slit it here down to this hole. And then if you can see, there are spot welds all the way across this thing, and obviously on the bottom too. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, drill those out so I can pull the face of the dash off. Now, it is a really nice, pretty looking dash, and that's actually why I want to do it like this. I don't want to hack everything up. I want to carefully, methodically pull this section off. All the cuts, which I will weld back together, will be under the dash pad. Even the holes that I have to, the spot welds I have to drill out, will be under the dash pad. On these old GMs, the dash is not attached on either end. Only up here to the A-pillar and to the bottom. So this kick panel actually slides in here. So you can also see kind of where I'm going to run that tube through right here, kind of next to the AC vent. But I think just in order to get this passenger side one in, I don't really have the same amount of room that I have on the driver's side, because I'll have to poke directly through the metal to fit that. I'm going to have to go ahead and do that first. I might try to drill this hole and try to put the tube in, just see if I can get it in and visualize it before removing the face of the dash. But regardless, that's just how I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side too. That little piece will come out, and then I'll just put it back in, weld it back in. When everything's all put back together and I close the floor up, where I'm going to cut it for the bars and everything. So sorry for the long-winded kind of explanation of that, but I just kind of wanted to tell you why, kind of justify my reasoning on that. And the owner of the car is cool with it. It's all going to be invisible when the car is fully assembled, so that's going to be good. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just cut that hole in the floor right now, and then I'll work on clearancing this next. Alright, so at this point I'm going to go ahead and use the die grinder to open up the dash. I went ahead and I pulled the A-pillar pad out just so I don't mess it up with any sparks that might come off. I've got the hood covered up and all that kind of stuff. Just want to try to avoid any disasters. So I'm just going to use the, this is actually a 3/4 inch drum sander, and I'm going to open this up, and then I'll switch to a 1.5 inch, which makes a really nice 1 5/8 hole eventually. And I'm going to use a little length of 1 5/8 tubing to make sure I'm getting the right shape. Alright, cool. So went ahead and I made that hole. It looks like it's going to fit pretty well. I might have to kind of belly the front of it out a little bit, or it might be just right, just depending on exactly where this tube lands. But it should allow for that to fit through there well. And then what I need to do next is open up the bottom of the dash. On this side it wraps under where that side doesn't. It kind of pokes through the bottom of the instrument bezel over on that side, on the driver's side, and on this side it actually pokes through the sheet metal. So I'll open that up next, but this thing is it's getting close to being able to accept that passenger side A-pillar tube. Alright, so now it's time to go ahead and drill the hole in the bottom of the passenger side of the dash, kind of within the confines of that tape there. I've already kind of made a mark. I've measured that side from this point on the cage, and then compared it to this side and made my marks and stuff. Now, don't fret too much. I mean, you know, viewing this thing as if you're sitting in the car or looking at the car from the outside, you can barely even see where this is. So worst comes to worst, it's not very visible. It is kind of a daunting thing, this having such a nice dash and nice everything, but put a nice cage in it, so it's just kind of part of the process. But I've got a 1 5/8 hole saw with a 1/4 inch arbor. I got a 1/4 inch bit I'm going to start my hole with, and I'm going to position it kind of where that mark is, obviously. And then go ahead and poke the hole out. And then I'm going to try, I've decided I want to go ahead and just try to put the passenger side bar in. So I'll stick it through this big hole and down into that, and then try to see if I can wiggle it in here. And we'll see if I can do it. But let's go ahead and poke this hole. Alright, so obviously I've drilled the pilot through, and my goal was when I drill the hole using the hole saw, or cut the hole, I want the hole to be kind of on the right side of this tape mark thing. After measuring that one, the bar rides a little further out than I kind of intended, which is good. It's tighter. That's just kind of how it lays in there. and then I'm hoping it comes up and just kind of grazes the tape here, and then I'll have a nice tight fit. But you know, I can fine-tune anything down the road. So the other thing I need to do carefully is kind of send this hole saw straight up so that I'm cutting the profile as the tube will pass through it. All right, cool. Nailed that. That looks, I guess I can't really say it looks great because it's a hole in a nice dash, but that's gonna work nicely. It's a little to the right, just barely graze the tape up there on the top, and that should work. You can kind of look through the hole here. It's already, should pass there nicely. So I'm gonna take the die grinder and just clean that up a little bit. Alright, so I just use the die grinder to clean that hole up and also elongate it this way just a little bit, just to give me a little wiggle room. When I go ahead and drill the face of this dash off, drill all the spot welds, just pull that out of the way, I'll be slitting this forward, which will allow it to come off and go back on with that bar in place. So I just need to cut the bottom to sit on the frame and also notch the top to sit on the main hoop right here. And that's one thing that I wanted to do before I actually made that cut. I needed to measure the angle of the frame on this side because just to make sure, and I'm glad I did. The other side was like 27.5 degrees, and this side's like 29.5, 30 degrees of angle on this piece that the A-pillar bar will be sitting on. So I'm going to cut that with a little more angle. We'll check that out next. All right, so back over in my shop here, and what I'm working on right now is just some of the final marking on the A-pillar and roof bar for the passenger side here. I've already kind of got all the measurements laid out from when I bent this thing off camera, but I need to make this mark all the way around because I need to notch. I'm gonna use the notcher in the same setup where it's angled. It's actually angled 5 degrees, so the lean back of the main hoop is 8 degrees, but since I'm catching the main hoop with these bars on the curve, that lean back angle diminishes as you go from lean back vertical to horizontal part of the main hoop. The legs on either side are lean back 8 degrees, but the top theoretically is level. So you want to catch that angle depending on how far around the bend you're going to diminish that a little bit. Regardless, that's what I'm working on right now. I've got the notcher set up at a 5 degree angle. I've got it set up at 5 degrees with the shortest part being where the hole saw starts going through. So it's going to create a longer trough on the back side of the notch. And since that main hoop is leaning back, that's going to need to be on the top of the notch, relatively speaking. It actually hits it at 50 degrees, so the inner top, and then the shorter part's going to be the outer bottom. Sorry to complicate it so much, but just kind of wanted to explain in case you're curious. But again, marking for that, and then we'll go set it up in the notcher itself, make the notch, and then cut the bottom at that 29 degree angle, take it over there and try it out. right, so got the main hoop end all notched and cleaned up. And what I'm doing right now is just measuring out for cutting the frame rail end. And I got a couple measurements to go off of based on the other side. Calculated stuff, also a measurement that I was just kind of taking from the trough of the notch to the point of the frame rail side. So I'm gonna go ahead, work on marking this thing out, and then I'll set the cold saw up and we'll go ahead, cut it, and then take it over to the car. All right, so I've got the bar all set up in the cold saw. Now it's just time to go ahead and cut it. All right. Got it all cleaned up, cut up. Let's try it out in the car. All right, so went ahead and jammed the tube into place. I was able to install it. I had to open up the back of this hole that I just made in the bottom of the dash just to angle it down through this hole and into that hole with that straight part. So at that angle, it just didn't want to stick through there. But like I mentioned before, that's going to have to continue forward anyways. Still looking really nice and clean on the front side. And I've got it positioned in. It lands right where it pretty much needs to back there. But what I've been looking at is for some reason, it's just leaned in a little bit. So I think what I'm going to need to do is clearance this a bit, just so that can lean out and tighten up against that A-pillar. So that's kind of a good problem. Means I didn't grind too far. If you look at this side, how tight it is, you know, there's barely ½ inch here, and on this side there's closer to an inch. So just got to kind of grind that, adjust it in, and I can tell it's really tight here. Like I had to jam the tube in, so it's pushing against that anyway. So I'm just going to mark it, clearance that, and then also looking at this from the side, the bar is just a little proud here. So I think I'm going to end up ultimately taking, I think, almost 1/8 of an inch off of this notch, just so that kind of fits back on there. But just going to do some fine tuning, then we'll check it out. Just going to kind of mark where it needs to be trimmed on the dash. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull this tube out. Since I'm thinking I'll need to shorten the top, I don't want to grind in this area because that's looking pretty good. It's pushed up tight, so hopefully I'll lay down just right, and this thing will end up fitting really sweet. Now that that's ground away and the tube's kind of back in place there, I want to take a look at how the A-pillar pad kind of fills all that in, and get some dimensions and compare them side to side here. Alright, so if you're able to see, that's actually looking really even now at this point. You can kind of go over here and take a look at the driver's side, and just kind of how all that fits. And then taking a look at the passenger side here, it's getting really close. So I might just kind of clearance that a little more. just to make the fit a little happier. I'll take some measurements, but that's looking close. I think just a little more and it'll be perfect. You know, once again, I mean, this is, you know, poking right through here, and that's looking good, and this notch looks great too, so that's good. Just a little more to go. All right, so I actually just ran over to my shop and shortened the top rear of that bar where it meets with the main hoop, just like a blade width. And now what I'm going to do is take the die grinder and I'm going to open up the hole in the top of the dash here just a little more, and then stick that bar in and we'll check it out. Alright, so got the tube fitted back in there. Still pretty tight right here, but that's good. That just means I'm sneaking up on that fitment. So I think I want to take a little bit out of here. And actually on the other side you can kind of see how that'll end up fitting. It kind of droops down a lot to fit around that tube. So just going to kind of work on that a little bit more. Look at it from the front. It's getting really close. The roof portion still fits onto the main hoop pretty nicely, you know, so that's looking good. Might need a little fine tuning, but that's nice. It's looking good. It's a little fine tuning to go and it'll be perfect. All right, and after a couple little adjustments with the on the hole through the top of the dash there, got this thing looking pretty good. It's matching the other one pretty well. This gonna have to adjust these guys a little bit, but you can see, you know, they're about the same. So, you know, still maybe a little touch up to do, but it's looking really sweet. Looks good. Fits right through, nice and tight up top. Fits against the main hoop really nicely, and also it matches the bar on the other side pretty nicely. Hard to see, maybe I can get a little more light over there, but that's looking sweet. So the next major bar to go in after I finish fitting these two is going to be the windshield bar, which kind of goes across the top of the windshield between these. So obviously need these to be perfectly in place for that, but looking really awesome, nice and tight. Now that I've got the A-pillar bars fitting in here nicely, as you can see, I've got this string laying across either side. That side actually has a plumb bob on it, just to kind of keep this tight. And what I've been working on doing is just measuring kind of how much room I have above and in front of this string. So you can see the rear view mirror screws on to the roof in that area, and it's got that rear screw. If you watch the Nova stuff, it attaches pretty much the same as the Nova. It's got two screws kind of in front, and then that one that's in the rear of the mirror mount and kind of on top there on the ceiling, obviously. But I want to make sure you can get to that rear screw, so I don't want the bar to travel too far forward. And also, obviously, I don't want the bar to be hitting the ceiling, or the headliner for that matter. So I've come up with some measurements and kind of drawn out a bar, and I'm going to go ahead and we'll make it next. Here's the design. You can kind of see some of the math here. there's just like a vague drawing of it. It's pretty simple. It's just got 2 curves, and I've set the curves with that stitching in the headliner. They're gonna the curves are gonna go across those stitches. For the stitches on center with the roof bars are 8 inches away from the center line of the roof bar to the stitches. And then I wanted an inch forward and an inch up, so I'm going to angle the bar about at 45 degrees. The reason I say about is because this is angled down at 3.5 degrees, and I'm actually going to go ahead and make it 45, and it'll lean down to like 41.5, which will work kind of better. It'll end up leaning a little farther forward than an inch, and then not quite an inch tall. And I think that'll fit nicely. And then, so that gave me like a full travel of 1.4, 1.4, 2.135, and so on. And then at 8 inches of kind of run versus that rise, if you use that terminology, that actually gave me 10.02498 degrees, which is really close to 10 degrees. So that's what I'm going to be bending it at. And then I just did some further math to kind of figure out what my notch angle will actually be. So it won't be that 10 degrees because it's angled up. So it actually turned out to be closer to 7 degrees. And then I'll be angling it like, where does it say? Almost a ½ degree less than 45 when it's in the notcher, just to kind of make up for how the planes interact. Just if you're curious about some of the math. So I'm gonna go over to my shop, go ahead and bend the tube up, and then we'll bring it back and try it out in the car. All right, so as you can see, back over in my shop, and I'm gonna go ahead, cut a piece of metal, and I'm gonna take it over to the workbench, mark it all out, mark where I need to start my bends, and then go ahead, bend the tube up, give it a couple notches, and then we'll check it out in the car after that. All right, cool. So got it all bent and notched, measured it up, did some fine tuning with the die grinder, and marked the driver's side just so I kind of know how it goes in there just quickly. But that's looking good. Let's go check it out in the car. All right, cool. Looking pretty good. I'll check it all out from all the different angles, measure it, make sure it's seated in right, but it's looking sweet. Check this guy out. Nice and tight. Look at that thing. Got this cardboard jammed in here just to steady this A-pillar and roof bar for right now, but the thing's looking really nice. As you can still see the edge of the roof, and this thing attaches right before the curve. I could move that a little forward or whatever I need, but I think that's going to be a good spot. As you can see, it clears the screw for the mirror there. It's nice and out of the way from the outside too. Again, you get that nice clear visibility for traffic lights and stuff. You're looking up out of the windshield. Nice and tight. You can see how the curves are right where the stitching in the headliner is. Follows the curve of the headliner pretty well too, kind of considering where the original sun visors would go and all that stuff. One thing to consider is those visors. The owner of the car isn't planning to run them, just leaving that deleted. So it's all right to kind of block them. I have considered, you know, it might be possible to make some that actually attach to the roll cage and flap up or forward if need be, but never really had to deal with anything like that. So I guess you could always position this bar extra far forward, or maybe you could even back it up a little bit, but I've got it right here before the curve, and I like that. Gives clearance for important stuff, but also it's far enough out to protect the driver. The notches also look pretty good as far as I can see, not much of a gap, so that's always awesome, and worked out nicely. All right, so now that I've got the windshield bar, the upper windshield bar in, made up, mostly fitted, as well as both A-pillar roof bars. The next thing I'm going to have to go ahead and do is to pull the face of the dash out of here. Once again, this seems like a really drastic kind of measure, but if you consider that the dash pad kind of rests against this trim panel here, and I'm going to be drilling out these spot welds, and the other ones are all along the bottom of the dash, it's really not going to be too intrusive at all. I will also be, once again, slotting in front of where that tube goes to the dash there. It's already partially slotted now, but I'm just going to carry that all the way forward so that when this piece goes back on, I can install it with that bar in place. It's just going to kind of slide on there, and it won't be a problem that this is open. It'll fasten to the framework on either side. And the one thing I'm going to have to cut is right here, and I'll weld that back later unless I put a tab there and screw it back together. One thing I'm considering is kind of bolting and screwing this all back together just so that it is removable for wiring or anything like that. That's an option I kind of breezed past the owner of the car. He didn't really seem too concerned either way, just wanted it put back together nicely, of course. So I might weld it, or I might fasten it if I can figure out a really slick way of doing that. Regardless of that, I'm just gonna have to start drilling some spot welds. Oh, and I also want to cut it right here. I was gonna say I gotta cut it there, and that way this piece is out of the way. And then again, that's just simply so that when I drop the frame, this tube has room to drop down, and it'll also make the installation of the lower windshield bar or dash bar a lot easier. So that's going to go across inside there. We want to send it over the steering column, and you know, obviously behind the gauge cluster, bezel, and all that kind of stuff. So that's the plan. Now I just have to drill a ton of spot welds out, so we'll do that. And then once that's out of the way, it'll be time to clean these tubes up and actually start tacking them in. So let's check it out. All right, so as you saw, I've been working on drilling out these spot welds, and got them all drilled out across the top. Had to kind of actually just use this gasket scraper, and I had to chisel a couple of them loose, but you can see that this panel is totally loose from the top there. I'm not drilling these out. I'm going to slit it right here. I've also been working on the bottom. So it had a bunch of tiny little looking welds in the bottom that I just kind of piloted with a 1/8 bit. Some of them you can see I went from the top. That's why this light's in here. It was a lot easier because it was dimpled from the top and it was mounded at the bottom or bumped out, whatever. Concaved, convexed, whatever you want to say. But the dimples were small, like 1/8 inch size. So I was hoping I could get this thing loose with some real small holes, but I've drilled 1/4 inch holes in this thing and it's still holding together. So I might take that 3/8 spot weld cutting bit I got from Summit. So here it is. It's kind of like a drill bit, but modified almost. It's a really nice tool for spot welds, actually. I should be oiling it, but I just don't want to get oil all over this paint and stuff in here. But I've got a few of those and they work really well. I guess what I'm going to do is work on enlarging the holes just until I could finally get one loose. If it takes 3/8, it takes 3/8. And that's fine. I can weld that back together or whatever I need to do. That's what I'm going to work on next. Just trying to get the bottom loose, and then I'll make the two little slits at the top here and here, and this thing will be out of the way. All right, so finally I've been messing with this thing, drilling those bottom holes out bigger, and I finally got the panel loose. Now I just have to make that slit there and there under where the dash pad goes, and get it out of the way. I went ahead and I grabbed a 1/2 inch bolt, and on one of these welds that I had to drill through, I had to drill 1/2 inch and I went all the way through the metal. And so I just went ahead and bolted that on to hold it still. Didn't drill through any of these completely. I grabbed a 3/8 bolt thinking that I had, but Obviously the goal is not to drill through both layers of the metal. I'm going to have to kind of restore this piece before I put it back, which is not a huge deal, but sometimes you just go through. Regardless, I've secured it back in place. Going to make these cuts, and I want to make this one as far back as I can, I think. Obviously, I want to cut it kind of behind this too, so probably be right in this area. The dash pad covers that nicely. And then cut this all under the dash pad once again. So we'll check that out next. All right, so made those two little slits, and this guy's totally loose, just held on by that one bolt. So next I'm gonna go ahead, pull this out of the way, and we'll take a look. All right, so that pulled out pretty cleanly. You know, I've got the holes drilled through here, and then a couple holes up through that. Some of those slots are factory, but all in all, pretty clean. Didn't tear anything up too dang much. So that's good. Now it's time to move on to the other side and get that little piece on the driver's side out of the way. All right, so over here on the driver's side, went ahead and I pulled the tube out, and you can kind of see what I'm dealing with on this side. So this needs to come out of the way just like the other side did. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and cut it somewhere in here. I'm considering going over to where it's real thin right here, but I'm going to take a real gander at it, just kind of decide on a good spot. I think I want to leave this kind of J nut here. I want to leave that, or a U nut. I want to leave that in place. This is what the dash fastens to, and I think it'd be better if that stays part of this, just in case this moves around a little. But I'm going to try to get it right back where it goes anyway, so no big huge deal on that. Just want to make sure it goes back together right. But I'll cut that, slit that just like the other side, and then on the bottom it all welds together again just like the other side. So more spot welds to drill. That'll liberate this, and then a couple little cuts up here. And again, this is under the dash pad and instrument cluster. That's next. Pull that out. All right, cool. So got the bottom here loose. As you can see, that one gave me a little trouble there, but I finally got it loose without totally tearing it up. And now it's just time to go ahead and cut the top. All right, so the next step is going to be to go ahead and pull the A-pillar pad off so that I can get to where I need to cut the dash, and also just to protect it from any sparks of hot metal. All right, cool. And as I pull it out, you can notice how much of the dash this actually covers up itself. You know, again, this is where I'll be cutting just like the other side to liberate that little piece, and then here as well. So looking good. Now it's just time to make a couple cuts, and this guy's ready to come out. Cool. All right, and before I cut it, I'm just kind of looking at the structure of this, deciding where I want to make the cut. I'm just going to go ahead and mark it with this gold Sharpie. Obviously I want to avoid cutting through where that J-nut I showed you earlier goes. And I also want to hit this thing kind of at the at a narrow point, just so that the repair to put it back together isn't too much. But chosen a spot, and I'll show it to you here in a sec. All right, and if you look at that left line, you can see how that kind of leads around. It avoids kind of this thicker area with the flange, and it avoids that J-nut, and it'll give me plenty of room for the tube. So I think I'm actually going to cut just a little bit actually to the left of that left line, and then just cut right through this just like on the other side. Alright, cool. Just had a tiny little piece there, but came off nice and clean. Alright, cool. Got that piece out of there. I just barely couldn't quite reach the edge there, but it's just a little bit, and I was able to fold it back and forth a couple times and pull it out without making a big mess or anything. It's just a tiny little bit. So that's going to weld back in later when it's time to put it back. Cut it nice and clean. But now there's room to mess with tubes. Cool. Alright, so I've got the passenger side A-pillar roof bar sitting in the car right now. I just kind of mocked it up to make sure that it still sits down where I've drawn this golden ellipse here. And so what I need to do next is go ahead and polish this part of the frame up. And I'm going to grind down the welds for this boxing plate as well. Just make it a nice smooth spot to weld onto, and then it'll be time to go ahead and stick the bar in and get ready to tack it in after I clean everything up. Alright, so if you can tell, I've got both of these A-pillar and roof bar tubes back in, and what I'm doing now is just kind of making sure they're going to drop right in where they need to go. And the first thing I'm looking at right here is just how it fits against this hole in the dash. And if you can tell, there's a little bit of space around here except for the very rear tip. So I'm going to clearance that a little bit, and that'll allow this tube to lean outward just a little bit, and just making it a little tighter and matching the other side better. So I'm going to do that, but first what I want to do is just go ahead and mark where this lands on the frame. I'm just going to do that with the Sharpie here, just so that I can go ahead and when I pull this tube out, I can see exactly where this is going to land, so I can make sure it's really clean all around there, bare metal, and also so that I know where to drill the gas expansion hole. There is one in the main hoop as well, but usually I just like to go ahead and drill one on either side of the tube just to make sure everything breathes appropriately. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm going to clean these up and get them fitted back in and get them ready to tack. Alright, and while I'm at it, I'll also go ahead and mark the driver's side here. And as you can see, I've got a little bit more polishing to do on the frame, just right where this tube lands. So this is a good opportunity to see what I need to clean up, and go ahead and do that next. Alright, cool. So here's the passenger side, and this is where I marked where that A-pillar roof bar sits down on the frame, and got a 1/8 drill bit set up in the drill ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and poke that gas hole, and then we'll go over to the other side and do the same. Alright, cool. So went ahead and got the hole drilled on both sides here. And if you can notice where this tube sits down, I need to do a little bit more polishing. So I'm going to go ahead, grab the roll lock on the die grinder and polish that up. Give it a nice landing spot, and there'll be time to clean the tubes up. Alright, looking nice, clean, and shiny. Now it's time to make the same of the tubes that land there. Alright, so I've got the A-pillar bar, the driver's side one, set up here, and what I've done is I've made a mark where I want to drill a gas expansion hole where that upper windshield bar lands on this bar. And I'm going to go ahead and do it for both sides. It'll be a lot easier now than when it's in the car. And so I'm going to go ahead, poke these, and then it'll be time to clean these up, get them all cleaned out, and put back in the car. Alright, looking good. Alright, and one other thing that I have to do before this bar goes back in is just go ahead and grind the tip of this opening down a little bit, like I showed you earlier, to make more room for this bar so that it can tip over this way just a little more. Alright, cool, that should work. Alright, so I actually went ahead and grab the tube, put it in place, and now when I measure it, it's looking a lot more like the other side. It's fitting in there nice and tight, so that should be awesome. Alright, so off camera, I've been working on cleaning up and polishing the A-pillar and roof bars. Not only have I cleaned up where the upper windshield bar will weld on, but I've also been working on the ends. This is the side where it welds to the main hoop, and then this is the bottom where it's gonna weld to the original chassis of the car. Also cleaned up where it passes through the dash, and then obviously been working on cleaning up the upper windshield bar as well. So a little more work to do on those, just to get them super clean inside and out. Then it'll be time to prop them up in the car and start tacking them in. Alright, so I've got the driver's side roof and A-pillar bar all cleaned up here. So I'm going to go ahead and install it to the car. Looks good. Now I just got to finish cleaning up the passenger side and stick it in as well. Alright, got the passenger one all cleaned up. Put it down into place. It's looking good. Gonna work on getting these positioned exactly right, and it'll be time to go ahead and tack them in. Cool. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with the first tack. I'm gonna get the driver's side tube here positioned onto the main hoop. I'm going to try to just put a little fusion tack while I hold this exactly where it goes. I'm hoping that I'm okay without filler weld for just this first one. And then what I'll do is just measure everything out once I have this first tack in, get the bottom set up on the frame rail and everything, and then just kind of go from there. And I'll do both sides like this, just kind of taking it one tack at a time. Well, let's get that first one on here and then check it out from there. I want to get this positioned up here, then I can go ahead with that tack. Alrighty. Obviously that piece of tape got pretty hot, but that shield kept any radiant heat off of the headliner, and looking good. Peel this out of the way. Have a look at that tack. Gonna wipe off some adhesive, and that's looking pretty good. Lines up with the tape nicely, and that should work. Cool. Alright, so I've got everything in place, and now I'm just going to go ahead and make a tack right here down at the base of the driver's side A-pillar bar. Weld it down to the frame rail. I'm going to try to get a little fill rod in there with it too. Alright, go ahead and measure it and make sure I'm spaced off 2.5 inches. That's looking pretty good. Cool. So at this time it's looking good. I'm just going to leave, I think I'm just going to want to leave one tack per end here. I think that's going to be plenty as I fit the other side and fit the upper windshield bar in. If anything breaks loose, I'll be able to tell where it goes anyway. Let's go ahead and move on to the other side. Same plan on this one. I'm going to try to just fuse this outer piece here while maintaining the position of this tube right against the top edge of that tape. And I've got the heat shield in place already, so that's ready to go. So I'm just going to tack this, and we'll go down to the front. All right, got a pretty good tack out of that. Looks pretty much like the other side, and just gonna let that cool a little bit and pull that piece of tape off and get the shield out of the way if I need to, but looks good. Time to move down to the front. All right, cool. So got everything set up for the front bottom of the passenger side. Gonna go ahead and weld it up too. Alrighty, I made sure that tack was nice and strong with filler, and also made sure that I got the frame and the tube penetrated there. Kind of hard to see at this lighting too, but it's in. So I've got both pieces tacked up. I'm going to keep measuring, making sure everything's good to go before I add any more welds. And I'll also work on getting the upper windshield crossbar fitted in. We'll go from there. Alright, so after I got the roof and A-pillar bars in, I went ahead and I positioned the upper windshield bar in place. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of looking at how the notches match up, and it's got a little bit of wiggle in it. And if you can see that, this rear notch is loose while the front one's tight. And that's one thing you can kind of tell is when you rock a tube, you can see what's moving and what's not, because this notch looks good, but it's actually loose, so meaning the front one's tight. So I'm going to grind that one, but it actually happens to be opposite on the other side. It's just a tiny little bit, but I want to go ahead and kind of grind those in, get it to fit just right. So I'll do that next, and then put this guy up in place, make sure it fits right, clean it, and then it'll be time to tack it in. If you recall, just from a little while ago, I've already got the gas expansion holes drilled in there. I wish I could go ahead and drill the gas expansion hole for the roof diagonal that'll be going in the car, but not exactly sure how that's going to be routed yet. Looking at that, the next video is going to be about doing the funny car stuff and all of that. But from that funny car bar, I can either run that diagonal from that outer edge of the funny car bar to at the most 1 foot from the corner of that other side, or it can run the other direction. But a 25.5 only has to have one diagonal, whereas like a 25.3 or 2 has to have an X. So it's another thing I need to ask the owner of the car about to see how he wants it done, and we'll figure that out. But for right now, gotta do some final fit up work on that upper windshield bar. All right, so I went ahead and grabbed that upper windshield bar out of the car, and I had, you know, marked where I need to grind the notches down a little bit. The front on this side and the rear on the other side I just showed you. So I'm gonna go ahead, take the die grinder and do that at this time, and then fit it back in and see how it looks. All right, got those notches cleaned up, sanded everything and wiped it all off, got it nice and clean to put up into the clean roof bars there. So let's see how it fits in the car. All right, so got the bar in place, and you can see I've lined the front up with the line that I made on the bar there, on the roof bar. And I'm just kind of looking at how this fits, and it looks like the rear needs just a little bit more trough in the notch. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of mark where that's tight and go check out the driver's side. All right, so looking at this side, it does wiggle around. Looking at the front, you can see it's moving a little. So it just needs a little bit more on the back, and I think that's the same as it was before. But just kind of want to sneak up on it, make sure it fits great. All right, so I've been working on fitting this bar up, and with all this grinding with the die grinder, the edges have gotten really thin. And so I'm going to take it over to my shop, go ahead and touch these up in the belt sander, and give it a nice chamfer all the way around too. You want to do that just so that you're not welding this really thin metal onto the attaching tube. It's stronger if you get down to where the metal's thicker. And also just welds a little better. But I'm gonna go do that. I'm also gonna bring the passenger side face of the dash over there and go ahead and cut out to fit around the A-pillar bar. So we'll head over there and check it out from there. All right, so back over at my shop at the belt sander, I'm gonna go ahead and dress the ends of the upper windshield crossbar here, and then cut that slot out of the dash so that it fits onto the A-pillar bar there. And then we'll head back over and stick them back on the car. All right, so as you just saw, went ahead and stuck this back in place after I brought it over here from my shop, and it's fitting in there pretty nicely. Caps look pretty good. Here's the fit up on the driver's side. Looks really nice and tight. So that should weld up really nicely. That's looking good. It's in solid, doesn't rock or anything, so that's going to be really awesome. All right, so I went ahead and I clamped and bolted the pieces of the dash that I took out earlier back in the car, just to kind of have a look at them and make sure they fit around the tubes and stuff. Still doing a little final fit up work like up in this area, but all in all, looks good. Fits on there, and a couple places where I drilled all the way through trying to get those welds out. I actually put some bolts through, so for now that's kind of helpful. Got the driver's side on there too. Here's the driver's side. I've got it clamped with some vice grips, and still needs a little work up at the top there, but got the bottom clamped on, and it's looking nice and stock, original, and clean, however you want to put it. But what I want to work on real quick is the owner of the car wanted me to go ahead and raise this number 15 main hoop crossbar up a little, and I left it loose just sitting on these hose clamps. This is the lowest position that I ever planned to be able to put it. That's why it's just kind of sitting on this stuff. I figured I might want to or have to raise it up, and so all I have to do is just shorten these two tubes, the 44 and 45 helmet bars. That's the SFI numbers for them, and so I'm just going to shorten those as much as I want to go ahead and raise this tube, and then I'll just need to move these hose clamps up, and so I'm going to go ahead and do that next. Alright, cool. So after trimming the number 44 and 45 helmet bars, went ahead and mocked everything back up in the car, along with the number 15 main hoop crossbar that they sit on. And I even went ahead and threw the seat back in the car. And as you can see, everything's looking good. This number 15 bar lines up nicely with the door latch striker pin here, and that looks good. But the main reason for me raising that bar was just that the owner wanted it a little higher so that the funny car bar, which attaches to the roof bar up there, comes across and goes down here, was just a little bit higher and tighter and out of the way for a shifter arm. So I think I've accomplished that pretty well. It's looking good, and that's just going to allow them a little more room in that area. I also went ahead and installed the pads on the A-pillars, and so we can check out how nice and tight those A-pillar bars interact with the pads there, and it's looking really good. It should look awesome with the windshield in and everything all assembled and put together when it's time for that. And you can also see how these will cover up part of the gap where I had to cut those pieces off. And then the actual dash pad itself comes down and covers the rest of it. So that'll all look really nice, but everything's looking tight and looking right. And actually, since the last scene, I was able to have the driver, the owner of the car, come in, sit in the car and check it out. And the other thing I did while he was here is I made some measurements. So this green piece of tape kind of denotes where the it's in front of his helmet. So it denotes where that funny car bar will go. I've also made shoulder height marks and a few other things while he was here, so I know where to put the shoulder bars and other bars kind of relating to how he fits in the car. And while he was here, we also discussed the windshield bar, dash bar, and a bunch of other stuff, and just kind of got his approval on everything. He's liking it, and also I hope you guys are too. Hope this has been really helpful. Everything's looking really sweet in here, and I know I haven't welded this bar in yet, but we'll check that out in the next video. I think I'm going to be moving that forward just a little bit. I also want to be able to remove it because I'm going to be adding gusset tubes in the roof area of this car, is required by SFI for the 25.5 cage that this car is getting. And I'm going to have to drill gas expansion holes under where those sit. So it'd be nice to be able to go ahead and pull this bar out, drill the holes without the bar being in place. Also still have a little bit of final cleanup inside and outside of the bar, and just final measuring and positioning work to do with that. But we'll check that out next time, along with those gusset tubes that I just mentioned, and the funny car front inner bar, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So we'll check that out next time. Hope you guys are looking forward to it. And I really hope you enjoyed this look into the progress on the Chevelle so far. I want to thank you guys for watching, liking, and subscribing. I'm getting up close to 900 subscribers if I haven't already hit that mark, and really want to thank you guys for that. It's been awesome. It's almost been a year. November 1st will be a year as far as videos go. But I set my account up on Halloween last year, so it's been awesome, and I'm only looking forward to the future. But hope you guys tune in next time for the Funny Car Hoop stuff. Until then, take care, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.